Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 7th town hall. This is the 7th out of 13 town halls that we've had since the pandemic began. We will continue to have these as long as need be, as long as we find them informative and useful to continue to communicate the different policies, procedures, and updates on what's going on. This is the 13th town hall overall. We will have a specific focus today on transitioning back to a more normal fall of 21. I will point out that we have the bridge from this summer to get to the fall of 21 first, and that's going to take some doing. So that's what we'll be talking about today. It is hard to believe that we just had graduation last week, that we're wrapping up everything with the spring semester at this point, but here we are. What a year it's been. And I want to thank you so much for your hard work, your resilience, your energy, and everything that you've done to deliver the continued remarkable education, the research, and engagement in so many different ways. I'm very, very grateful. I also want you to know that I understand that everybody, as they think about the fall, or frankly even the summer, has different perspectives. Some are full of anxiety and worry because of personal or family or just larger issues societally, and some are really overjoyed. Some just can't wait to get back. There's a complete continuum, and it's in that context that I want you to know we will continue to communicate. We'll continue to be evaluating, reviewing all the different information that's out there. Think about how much the world has changed in even the last week. We see headlines every day related to what's happening in grocery stores, what's happening in public and private spaces, what the CDC is saying, where our system is at. You might have seen the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel today about some of the work that's happening around vaccines in some campuses nationally, requiring them, the first one in Wisconsin, Lawrence University. So these are the types of things that we're evaluating every day, and there's extensive meetings. We just got done with a long meeting this morning about a lot of our summer and fall planning in light of some of the newest guidance, but we're meeting daily in all sorts of different venues, and I want you to know we'll continue to get the word out. So our speakers today include Johannes, Chia Vang, Robin, Kelly, Scott, Mark Harris, Brian Swatala, Tim Danielson, and then we'll have questions and answers to follow. To save time, I'm asking all the speakers to just simply roll into the next speaker, introducing them as we go. We've received 17 questions as of the beginning of this town hall. We've answered 8 of them already directly. The rest of those questions will either be answered in the comments that speakers have today, or we'll feed them in to our Q&A when we get to that portion. We'll also incorporate these into our FAQs. So we'll continue to make sure we answer all your questions, and that will continue to be our policy as we proceed. So my comments, with that aside as the intro and housekeeping types of comments, I want to come from the perspective of we've got your back as UWM bounces back. That's a really important principle, we think, to continue to provide the assurances, answer questions, and give you the types of guidance to the best extent that we possibly can. I want you to know that we're just tremendously excited as the world has continued to turn this corner on COVID-19. It's changed all of our lives. It's certainly changed how we work, how we teach, how we expect our students to learn and their social circumstances, their employment and family circumstances in huge ways. So we've got an awful lot that we've been working through, but we've been successful in a huge way. And that's why I remain so optimistic and bullish in our capabilities to move forward. We are going to have to come back in a way that is not binary. It's not, in other words, you flip a switch and we're all back. It's a transition. It's a process, and we're going to use this summer in many ways to do that. So even this week, for example, we had some campus activities, and we'll continue to have those in different ways. We had 50 people in the 4th floor of the Goldemeyer Library. They then took a tour of our Connected Systems Institute, and we're going to continue to have a number of different activities and events. I know if you're a researcher on campus, you're pining to get back. You really want to understand what are the rules, what are the guidance. We're going to cover those types of topics today. And again, I just want to stress, we want to meet you where you are. We want to provide the necessary information and recognize that there's an entire spectrum. We're all in different places. I oftentimes liken this to the tolerance for ambiguity that you have. You are at a certain point, and some people are highly tolerant, they're very flexible, and they've been able to ride this storm with some comfort. And some have very little tolerance for ambiguity. They're quite concerned about uncertainty, and they're individuals that just have really struggled, and that's why we see the elevated mental health issues, the depression, the anxiety. These are things that are understandable, and so I think information in that context is really important. So let me share a few points. I want to always stress, and I have throughout this, that your safety and health are our first concern, and that of our students. So that's the foundation. The challenge that we have right now is that we're hearing very rapidly shifting information. So we're hearing from CDC, we're hearing some things coming out of, sometimes it's the city of Milwaukee, sometimes it's UW system, there's the state and other guidelines, and they don't always align. So I want you to know that we evaluate and make policy decisions based upon the best available information, and we always are looking at what's in the strongest and best interest of our campus. And of course, local regulations oftentimes are the ones that trump everything else. So we've worked very closely with Milwaukee Health Department. They're the ones that we really need to defer to. And so that's where that partnership is vitally important. And so that will continue. I also want you to know that independent of what you may have heard, we have masking and social distance requirements in place. On campus, masks are currently required and social distancing of 6 feet still required. We're continuing to review, we'll evaluate, but those are the policies that are in place. I suspect as the summer evolves, we will get to the point where we're relaxing the social distancing, and certainly by the fall, for us to achieve the 75% capacity, we will be in a much more relaxed social distance type of mode. But I want you to know that we currently still have those guidelines in place. This does vary a little bit because of some of our locations. In Waukesha and Washington County, their guidance and their health departments are evolving more rapidly and have evolved more rapidly. So we'll evaluate those practices very shortly and communicate. You also have seen, even again, the newspaper article today, and if you've been following the Chronicle of Higher Ed, they keep a daily running total, and you know that private academic institutions are often in the forefront in terms of requiring vaccines. Most publics have not adopted that. In fact, of all the universities in the country, over 90% are not requiring, or at this point don't plan to require a vaccine. I have raised the issue at system levels as recently as yesterday, and there's currently no plan, but there's actually quite a few incentive ideas that will probably be announced shortly in terms of strong encouragement, strong incentives for our students to be vaccinated at a very high level. So stay tuned for that. I anticipate perhaps in a week or two, there will be forthcoming some announcements and decisions around stronger incentives for that. Robin Van Harpen and her team will be talking in more detail about these. Big picture, there does continue to be a really low rate of positivity. In fact, yesterday, I don't think there were any deaths in the state of Wisconsin. The infections across our campus are negligible. Oftentimes we have 0 infections per day. These are great signs, and it just is an amazing testament to science and the value of research in terms of being able to follow safety protocol, but especially the effectiveness of the vaccine, which we just can't encourage people to have enough. So we look forward to much more continued good news. At UWM, speaking of good news, we will be releasing the EOC team report. That's coming out tomorrow, and that's the Emergency Operations Committee. There's some preliminary details that will be shared already in the town hall today. For this academic year, we've given almost 60,000 antigen and PCR tests across our 3 campuses to faculty, staff, and students. We continue to lead the way with the UW system being the leading place for testing across the state of Wisconsin, with over 50% of the tests given happening on one of our campuses. At the same time, on Monday, we celebrated giving our 15,000th vaccine And that's just an amazing feat. We've also added 12 to 15-year-olds to the vaccination protocol. As of Tuesday of this week, of those faculty and staff employees surveyed, we had 94% who reported being vaccinated. So that's pretty remarkable. Now that's out of 1,900 employees, so the overall response rate is probably biasing things because we have another number of employees that haven't responded, but that's pretty impressive. And then on the student front, with low response rates, but of those reporting, we have 84% of our students vaccinated on our main campus, 45% on the Washington County campus, and 65% vaccinated on the Waukesha County campus. Again, low response rates among students, but that's an indicator of some sort. We've got to continue to work on getting the response rate high so we really know overall what our vaccination levels are at. We will reduce, per the partnership we have with Advocate Aurora Health, we will reduce our hours for vaccination in the fall because we just don't have the demand, but we will continue to maintain vaccination sites and hours available. Final comments, as we look at the fall semester, I just want to offer a few things that I've said before and frame them again in the context of the importance of being back. I ask you always to think about how do we do our jobs the best, think about in our academic training, think about in our working lives, how have we operated in terms of our identities, in terms of our comfort levels, in terms of where and how do students learn, how do we conduct research. We want to be back as close to normal as possible. Let's continue to pull together, recognizing there's different beliefs out there, there's different values, there's different comfort levels, but we want to generally move toward that over the summer and really be ready to roll back in the fall. I have been on campus almost daily in different ways, and I have to tell you, I can't wait to see the grind open. I can't wait to see a lot of energy in the union. I can't wait to see our classrooms full and everybody back, but I know it's not going to be immediate. It's going to be a gradual thing. We'll get there. So with that, I want to share with you, transition to our provost, Johannes Britz, and he'll walk through a number of different elements guiding some of the conversation relevant to academic affairs. Johannes, please.
Thank you, Mark, Chancellor Mone. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And Mark, I just also want to say thank you for your leadership, specifically during the pandemic and the unknowns. And we had no playbook and no prediction. And also for the personal health crisis you went through. I'm glad that you're recovering well. And I just want to wish you and Sarah a good break. I know you're going to take a break in the summer, and I just want to wish you very well. I also just want to make use of this opportunity to thank everybody on campus for the extra mile and for the hard work, the dedication, working with us on the unknown, and actually had 2 successful semesters in very, very challenging situations. So I just want to say that as well. I want to, I'm going to introduce Scott Grinnett and Mark Harris to talk about the fall planning, scheduling of courses, online, where we are, how do we plan, change of modality. And then Mark will talk about the research plan as we have it. I also just want to say, hopefully this will never happen not happen in the fall semester, but should we hit another crisis, a health crisis, we do have a plan. The EOC did develop a plan that will mirror more or less what we did in the fall and the spring semester last year. On the change of modality, just a few comments. The same policy will apply when it is needed to change from, say, face-to-face to online, the same process, the same guiding principles, working, faculty member or instructor working with the department chair, the dean, it goes to the modality group, and then it comes to me for final approval. We will stick to that. And then I'm going to ask Scott and the Dean LNS, Scott Grinnett, also Scott, thank you again for your hard work in leading this scenario planning work group and having to make all the decisions and working, when do we know who's going to announce what and how are numbers coming up and down, and still do the planning because things needs to happen. So I just also want to express my appreciation for your work. And Scott, I'm giving it over to you to talk a little bit about some of the details as it relates to the fall planning for instruction. Scott, over to you.
Thanks, Johannes. And the scenario planning work group is a group of 26 faculty, staff, and students that have been working together since I believe April of last year. Over December and January, the group gave guidance for the fall schedule, which is going to be a mostly face-to-face schedule. The rationale was that we can pivot back from face-to-face to online, but we can't move from online to face-to-face. So that gave us the most flexibility. And for context, back in January, vaccines were just starting to roll out. We didn't know where we were going. Over the semester, we surveyed students again. We saw a strong preference for both face-to-face and online within our students, different groups. They also had desires for accommodations to continue from the pandemic era, a lecture capture, online options for students, and flexible attendance policies were things that they valued very much. The other side of that we saw in our student surveys, continued high levels of stress. We've seen in every semester trying to address those issues. So the current plan is for the scenario for the fall is mostly face-to-face with normal classroom capacities. As Johannes mentioned, we have a plan in place for pivoting back to a more online schedule if need be, but given the course of the pandemic, that doesn't seem very likely right now. In questions we've had, there were concerns, particularly about some department-held spaces and teaching in those. And one thing comment on that is that sometimes the department spaces just aren't at the same standards of our general assignment classroom. And so maybe it's not always possible, but looking at a general assignment classroom as an alternative might be a better one in certain circumstances. We're planning to have technology added to general assignment classrooms for lecture capture. This is coming out of the CARES Act funding, and a recommendation from the scenario planning work group will be for instructors to, if at all possible, take advantage of lecture capture. This was, again, highly valued by, it was over 85% of our students remarked on that. Now, during the last 2 semesters, we've asked instructors to provide online options to students in their face-to-face courses. That's just not sustainable over the long term, and so we won't be offering that during the next semester. That was a question that came from Allison Libby. Though we will continue to encourage faculty and instructors to be flexible in their attendance policies, because the fall will be offering lots of challenges to our students again, and those policies really help. And I'll also add one other thing from the survey work is that the students really appreciated the way our faculty and instructors showed compassion during the last 2 semesters. So they definitely remarked on that. The scenario planning work group report should be done in the next week or 2, and that will be coming out just a little bit after the EOC report. And so with that, I think I'll just turn it over to Mark Harris.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the researchers for everything they've done this last year in terms of accommodations. We've had virtually no problems, at least none reported, in our research facilities, which is really quite a remarkable accomplishment. Because of that success, we are looking at relaxing some of the restrictions upon research starting next week, and I hope to have a message out tomorrow to the research community. Basically, what we'll be doing is shifting to really the campus level restrictions for masking, social distancing for indoor work. We will not be requiring specific research operations plans at this point. This may adjust as we move through the summer because, as Mark commented, things are constantly changing on us, as we've noticed in the last week. And we'll also be looking to loosen some of the restrictions we put on the human subjects type of work as well. So look for an email, hopefully tomorrow at the very latest Monday morning, that will bring the research activity in line with the general campus restrictions and policies. So with that, I think I'll return it back. I think next is Robin, as I recall.
Thank you, Mark. In this section, we're going to cover administrative and student operations. I'm going to start with Chief Student Affairs Officer Kelly Haig, who will cover student life, and then she'll turn it back to me to cover finances and administrative operations, and I'll be assisted by our interim police chief, Brian Swatala, and our AVC for Human Resources, Tim Danielson. Turning it over to you, Kelly.
Good morning, everybody. It's really exciting to be at this stage of this, and so I'm really happy to be in front of you. You know, being together, being in community, and providing a vibrant campus life is critical to the success of our campus and to our students. We're planning for the fall to have opportunities for students to gather together, to get to know each other, the campus, either to rebuild or begin to build relationships with members of our campus. So while doing that, we also, of course, will be mindful of health and safety guidelines. Reinstating many of our campus traditions will be really vital as we kind of move into that next stage. Individuals representing a wide swath of the campus have developed some guiding principles to help us to be really mindful about kind of our collective experience, right? And so to acknowledge pain, loss, and reinforce our values as a caring community, help connect people with resources. And I think the Chancellor said it best earlier, right? This is not about just flipping on a switch, but being really thoughtful about one another as we return to being on campus at a more frequent rate. Some folks might have questions about what will it look like, right? So university housing, as an example, will have returned to near normal levels of students on campus. I think we will see a lot more openness of our offices. There will certainly be an expectation that, where students are used to going for resources, that those places will be open for them. I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about as a campus over the last year is finding those silver linings. And I think we found some really interesting and effective ways to engage our students, whether that's through kind of telehealth opportunities or really interesting virtual exercise classes or things like that. So I think, at this point, as we're working through the planning, it's really about taking the best of what we've learned over the last year and reconnecting those with our in-person activities. So there was some mention earlier about vaccines and ways that we want to incentivize. I want to just also kind of tack on to what has been said before, which is we really have, as a community, been very careful and thoughtful of one another. And I think that's evidenced by our low rates of infection. And so we know that there's an expectation that we will continue to care for one another in that way moving forward. But I did want to just briefly mention that we are exploring ways that we can incentivize vaccines, not just for our students, but also for our employees, so that people know, okay, hey, I've been vaccinated. Who do I tell? When do I tell? And why would I tell? And so watch for messaging with that, because it really will continue to take all of us. So exciting things ahead. We're really, again, thinking about how we can be together safely and with that excitement that many of us have. So I will, at this point, now turn it back over to Robin.
Thanks very much, Kelly. Okay, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about how we're doing financially. I am only going to cover this at very high level. I would strongly encourage everyone to read carefully the Chancellor's budget message that he released on Tuesday of this week. That provides more detail. But in general, as a result of COVID and the entire crisis, we did experience very large losses this past year, as we have predicted would likely be the case. But our cutting of budgets and the actions that we took in terms of the furloughs and restrictions on hiring, compensation, and travel created savings that were really vital to helping us close that gap in loss of revenue and allow us to recover from this. At the very end of the year, we learned that we would receive additional federal funding that also helped us to bridge that gap and reduce our losses. And the federal funding on top of the savings that we created this year gave us enough comfort in our budget that it allowed campus leadership to decide that we would not continue with intermittent furloughs this coming year. We have made that decision at this time. We still are permitting use of position-specific furloughs into next year as a tool for units to help balance their budget. Our anticipation is that these are used only in very limited circumstances as a bridge to helping employees return to full work or as a bridge to reducing staff permanently. We have received the question, in light of the federal funding, will furloughs be refunded? The answer to that is no. As of this date, the federal funding that we've received is far less than the restrictions, far less than the losses that we've experienced. So we need both the expense savings and their federal funding in order to recover from this crisis. We are carefully monitoring all of the factors that impact us financially and balancing all those facts and making decisions as we move forward. We're still at a crossroads in emerging from this crisis financially. We need to recover enrollment and activities on campus in the fall. We also don't have a state budget that's been finalized for the next biennium starting on July 1st. So we need to continue to be very careful in our budgeting and spending as we move forward into the fall. Schools, colleges, and divisions have their allocated budgets for the year, and those aren't changing from what's been allocated. We also received the question as a result of the Chancellor's message about how can we move forward with costly new initiatives that were outlined in the Chancellor's message. An alternative, could we pay bonuses to employees? And throughout this, we have to balance the need for austerity with also making critical investments for the future that will help us get back on our feet and support enrollment, student success, and research. Those investments that the Chancellor discussed were all judged to have a positive return on investment in terms of supporting enrollment and student success. And in aggregate, the cost of those incentives are modest relative to our overall expenses. And we feel that if we don't make strategic investments in our future, we'll be hurting even more financially in the future. I'll also say a few words about parking and transportation. This was, we received a number of questions in this area. Parking and transportation is one of the auxiliary units that suffered huge losses this last year, about 75% of its normal revenue. Parking and transportation is a self-supported unit on campus. The fees that they generate help pay for all of our parking ramps and lots and the busing and transportation services and leases on external lots. They are, after a very bad year this year, they are planning on being up to full operations in the fall in order to support our return to face-to-face classes and normal student activities. That will include the employee commuter value bus pass for employees, which will be reinstated at that subsidized rate. But in order to return to full services, they also do need to return to charging normal permit fees. There will still be losses because we'll probably have fewer people working regularly on campus compared to pre-COVID. And so we do need to return to that. Transportation Services will have the most up-to-date information on its website. Please stay tuned there. If you have questions, look there. As decisions are made and things are offered, that's where they will post them. They are focused on offering flexible parking options in the fall, including daily, monthly, and 9-month parking permits. We're covering a lot of topics in quick succession. I'm now going to just comment on a few things related to health and safety before I turn it over to Interim Chief Brian Swatala. The Chancellor covered a lot of this as much as we can in the session, but I just want to emphasize the EOC report is going to be released shortly within the next couple of days. While the current policy regarding masks and social distancing and other health and safety standards remains in effect, we are planning now to support full in-person face-to-face classrooms and in-person activities in the fall without required social distancing. That's required right now. That is the plan. That's what we're asking everyone to work towards. But we will, as we've done throughout this situation, continue to monitor. And if that is not warranted based on the health conditions at that time, we will pivot from that plan. In terms of vaccinations, at this time, the UW system decision is that vaccinations are not required for students or employees. And as the Chancellor stated, we'll continue to provide vaccine clinic hours based on demand, including for new student orientation when students are here in the summer and the fall arrival of students. In terms of COVID-19 testing, right now we are planning that we'll continue with testing probably into the fall for employees and students who are not fully vaccinated, likely similar to what was required in spring and what's being required over the summer. However, I do want to note the caveat that the testing is a UW system program, and if they change their stance on this, that would create some new decision making for UW-Milwaukee. And again, as was emphasized before, we had a really low infection rate throughout the entire spring of under 1% as that testing occurred. I'm now going to pass it over to Interim Chief Brian Swatala.
Thank you, Robin, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to provide a quick update on a number of areas. The first area is personal protective equipment. That is something that we have an adequate supply of, and that includes but not limited to gloves, masks, both disposable and cloth, disinfectant, and hand sanitizer. One of the questions that came up with regard to masks and that is if we would consider the medical grade mask for instructors in that. Although the EOC has not considered that as an option for medical grade masks or face shields for fall, that is something that we'll take back to the EOC and assess and provide some guidance on. We'll also continue to make these available through the fall semester. All those items of PPE I mentioned. The UWM website FAQ is a link on how to request the PPE through our central storage area. The next area I'd like to talk about is building preparedness and the operations. Buildings will be reassessed for signage, traffic flow, space occupancy, and layout. We'll also have hand sanitizer stations available in the public spaces in all of our buildings. The BPO assessment criteria will be based on UWM policy and direction from our campus leadership. One of the areas of question that have come up was about the heating and ventilation, air conditioning systems and that. I can tell you that UWM follows state specifications to make sure that indoor air quality is optimal. The heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems in campus buildings brings outside air into the system, which then is filtered. Once they meets operating temperature in that, the air is recirculated in the buildings, and that process includes more filtering and mixing with the outside air. Next area I'd like to talk about is travel. All university-sponsored travel is currently prohibited through at least June 30th, 2021. There are a few exceptions, and that is for essential travel. The criteria for that is travel is critical to UWM's mission, travel cannot be rescheduled, or the event must be attended in person. We'll be assessing and working with campus leadership to provide up-to-date policy changes. The fall plan will have gating criteria and will address almost all travel scenarios. The last area I'd like to talk about is large events. We will continue to follow campus policy, which is based on federal, state, UWS, and local guidance on large event safety guidelines. Currently, our summer thresholds for indoor events is 50 or under, plus support staff for occupancy. Outdoor events are limited to 100 plus support staff. Prospectively in the fall, we are looking at thresholds for indoor event capacity of 250, outdoor events of 750, or if a gathering that exceeds 33% of that event space. Any of those thresholds that may go over, we would request that a plan be submitted to the special request team. That is also part of the EOC. In the FAQ section of the website, it has our email address on how to submit a plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Tim Danielson.
Thank you, Chief Swatala, and hello, everyone. I'm going to talk mostly about working remotely, aka telecommuting. I'm happy to say that on Tuesday, UW System passed and published their telecommuting policy. The policy includes instances of working remotely short-term, intermediate term, and long-term. This presents to the institutions, including UWM, an opportunity for us to consider remote work potential or opportunity when things like sudden increase in childcare or elder care services, or maybe an intermediate need for an employee to provide care for a significant other. So I'm very pleased that those items are contained in the system policy. When an employee chooses to make a request to work remotely, and if that's approved, there's no loss for the employee in job security, benefits, or compensation. In other words, there's no penalty to an employee for making a request to work remotely or being approved to do so. So how will human resources help consider the possibility of working remotely? In early June, we'll be publishing an extensive remote work website. that includes lots of details about working remotely, including lots of resources that employees and supervisors will be able to access. It includes a section on frequently asked questions. It provides an opportunity for supervisors to think through a set of criteria that they can use and match against a request that they may receive from an employee to work remotely. And then also we're planning to offer a couple of information sessions for supervisors to help guide thinking and consider the possibility of remote work. So those will come again early June. Before I wrap up, I'd be remiss if I didn't provide a reminder about the system single payroll project. This is the project under which those of us who are paid monthly will be moving to a bi-weekly pay schedule. For 12-month employees, this will happen in July. For 9-month employees, this will happen in September. But for 9-month employees with a summer appointment, this will happen in July. Hopefully you've heard of this. If you haven't, or you're unfamiliar with some of the details of this, the best thing you can do is go to the HR website and click on the tile single payroll, and you'll get the details about this project. Okay, before I send it back to Robin, just one word about the empathy theme that you've been hearing from speakers here this morning. It's so important for us as we emerge from the pandemic. Part of what will make us successful is our ability to be considerate of each other's feelings. Keeping in mind, we don't always know what the circumstances are behind those feelings. So please keep that in mind as we begin to emerge from the pandemic. Okay, Robin, back to you.
Thank you, Tim. I just wanted to note that the EOC report will contain more extensive written information about remote work and the considerations that should be applied in balancing both the preferences of employees as well as the needs to serve our stakeholders. That will be combined with the extensive resource information that Human Resources is developing for their website. We did have a conversation about this at the Chancellor's expanded cabinet earlier this week, and we understand from some of the concerns raised that communication around the plans for remote work and what's happening are extremely important to employees. So we're going to be, now that we have the UW system policy on telecommuting, we'll shortly be coming out with further guidance for deans and division heads. We are going to be asking every dean and division head to ensure that all of their departments are talking to their employees, that they understand what the employees' preferences are, and that they have documented plans for how work will be accomplished in the fall, and are ensuring that there is a look over all of the work within each school, college, and division. We'll be coming out with more information for division heads shortly on that. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Chia Vang.
Good morning, everyone. Like most of you who are instructors, I am anxiously trying to grade 70 papers. Throughout the semester, I've learned directly from my students the challenges that they faced and continue to face. Like some of them, I have also lost multiple family members across the country due to COVID-19, including my father's younger brother, who had just retired and he was going to enjoy spending time with his children and grandchildren. So although I do not know each of your personal stories, I know that for many, this past year has been filled with the need to perpetually manage crises, some directly and others indirectly. We have also learned that the pandemic has impacted some communities disproportionately. The racial injustices occurring on a daily basis affecting Black and Brown communities, the violence directed toward Asian Americans due to the pandemic, the never-ending shootings in our country, and the job losses that have resulted in many families not knowing what to do, not having their basic needs met. So these are issues that I think about a lot, and there's many more that make it very difficult to see light at the end of the tunnel. The issues or topics that my colleagues have discussed are essential to us returning to a safe, campus. In the diversity, equity, and inclusion area, I think the 2,300 or more than 60% of you who have completed our anti-bias, anti-racist training. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank the 12 volunteer faculty and staff who led 14 groups in discussions throughout the semester. You volunteered for this, so I thank you. And I know Chancellor has expressed his thanks to you many times before, but I also want to reiterate that it's important for us to do this work together. For those of you who have not completed the training, I encourage you to do so by May 30. That's the deadline. As I've said before, this is just the beginning of the work that our campus will continue to do together. We will soon be sharing a new framework to guide our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. It has traditionally been a practice in institutions that diversity is carried out by a diversity office. Our new framework will have measurable goals and outcomes and strategies that will involve all campus units. This to me is very important because increasing diversity and equity and fostering inclusion is everyone's job, not just one office job. So thank you so much. I will now turn it back to, I believe, Chancellor Mone for the Q&A.
Wow, terrific, Chia, and all the speakers. Thank you so much for your important updates, the concerns that you've expressed about really meeting our employees where they are. And we want to continue to keep that spirit and communication wide open. So the first question that we move into now is going to be for Robin. Would you please recap the total financial contribution our collective furloughs had on reducing expenses for fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21?
Thank you, Chancellor. So we did not have very many furloughs in fiscal year 20. I believe we only had one intermittent furlough day in fiscal year 20. So the savings in fiscal year 20 were very minimal. We're still in fiscal year 21. And this question came in pretty late, so I don't have an exact number. When we instituted the furloughs, we estimated that the intermittent furloughs would save about $7 million across all of campus, and that the position-specific furloughs would be dependent on how units use them, but could be $2 to $3 million. So roughly $10 million total. At the conclusion of the fiscal year, we will have a better, more accurate number.
Thank you, Robin. We can provide in an FAQ further information with specifics on that. The next question is for Dave Clark, and it's from Chris Quinn in BioSci. An important aspect of returning to full operations will be to correct issues with Canvas. Regarding 1, we no longer have ability to export grades from Canvas to PAWS. 2, we no longer have the ability to import grades from Scantron to Canvas. Can you please explain how these issues will be addressed?
Thanks, Chris. I took a moment to dig into this question a little more, and I have some good news on this front. I touched base with UWM, and actually we'll be beginning testing of the Canvas to PAWS transition tomorrow. And so we hope to have some good news on that front in the near future, because they've now implemented what they hope will be the eventual fix for this problem. I'll admit to being less familiar with the Scantron issue, and I know in your full question you mentioned that the explanation on the knowledge base wasn't working properly. So I'd invite you to reach out to me personally, and I'd be happy to dig into this further, and we'll get a solution and communicate it more broadly. Thank you for your question.
The next question is for me, from Margaret Keith. What about having a vaccine sticker for our workspace or a button to wear, obviously only if people are willing? I will tell you, we're evaluating that right now, and I've heard of one campus in the UW system that is going to be having buttons available that say, I got vaccinated. There are some pros and there's some cons to that. One is the privacy issue that has to be considered. The other one is some of the political leanings that are associated with vaccinations. We're going to evaluate all the different considerations to determine what's the best path with regard to stickers or buttons or some other aspects. So stay tuned, and we'll convey that here in the next few weeks or month. Next question is for Robin from George Henlon. Are the shuttle vans that students, staff, and faculty use to get from campus offsite locations going to return to normal?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, we will be returning all of our pre-COVID transportation services, including the shuttle vans, back in the fall. We are closely monitoring what restrictions will be in place for transportation. Sometimes transportation and vehicles are under different standards than in rooms. So we'll continue to monitor that, but we are to ensure that the campus has what it needs in terms of transportation similar to pre-COVID for the fall.
Thank you, Robin. The next question is also for you, and it's from Dan Ernst, plumber in University Services. With the infusions of the federal dollars to make up for costs and losses during this issue, has anyone looked at returning furlough money back?
Again, we have not done that just because we're walking a very fine line here. We really need those savings that were generated. It's because of those careful savings that we now can look forward to not having furloughs in the future. But again, it's still, the situation remains in the balance. We need enrollments to return. We need a healthy state budget. We need to continue to be fairly conservative in our overall spending. So at this time, we don't have the means to return furloughs back to employees.
Thank you, Robin. And I would point out, just as a reinforcement of that message, that the losses that we have faced on campus are significant, and the federal funds do not begin to address all the losses that we've had. They're particularly evident in our auxiliaries area. Robin went through and talked about, particularly in the residential parking, dining areas. Those are significant losses, and the federal funds are appreciated, but keep in mind a huge portion of those go direct to the students, and that's a wonderful thing. So just keep that in mind. We've got a next question here, and let's see, it's Robin. No, I think that's, I'm just looking, looks like there's not an additional question. So I don't see any additional questions in our chat. Let's see. It looks like there might be a question from Mark Schwartz regarding when travel will return to normal.
Mark, I can take that. Or I see Brian is coming up. Brian can take that.
Great, thank you for the question. So this is an area that we're closely monitoring. Obviously, we've got a number of different gating criteria that we assess in that, and campus policy will certainly reflect what the guidance is, not just domestic, but also abroad in that. So whenever anything changes on this topic, we will make sure to push out that communication or change through our FAQs, which is probably the best method we have to get the information out widely.
Thank you, Interim Chief Swatala and Vice Chancellor Van Harpen. So we do not have any additional questions at this point. So I'm going to turn a corner and offer some final comments. And if we do get another question, we'll make sure we answer that. I want to just first reflect on something that's substantive, that deals with a question that came up earlier about how we can afford to make investments in priorities when we're facing such challenges. This is a really important issue, and this is something that I hope you can recognize. Over the last 7 years, we have dealt with, not on a daily basis, but certainly on about an every other day basis. We have faced declines in enrollment. We have faced declines in the state budget. We've had a tuition freeze. Fortunately, for the last couple of biennial budgets, we've received pay increases, and I hope that continues. Robin Van Harpen, Tom Lujack, and I have met with at least 45 to 50 different legislative meetings over the last month and a half. We have continued to prioritize the importance of employee compensation, funding of the Promise program, funding for UW-Milwaukee, and in particular on the capital project side, funding for our Northwest Quad building, as well as Sandberg Tower and the dock wall. So these are some critical priorities. I think that we're going to have some reasonably good news on some of these fronts. We won't know that until probably mid to late June at the soonest, in terms of the way the state budget is going forward. But I want to stress a couple of important principles. If you look at any other industry, any other sectors, what we understand is that when you're facing a declining environment, I don't care if you're in the retail space with electronic goods. Look at Circuit City compared to Best Buy. look at who survives. Look at who thrives. It's innovate or die. It's that simple. Innovate or die. And a related principle is you cannot cut your way out of decline. We can't just continue to cut. Higher ed has been faced with those types of challenges for a long time, and that's unfortunately a spiral that we need to turn around. And that's why the 2030 think tank plan and the implementation is so vitally important. In an update for you all, we are consummating the appointments, we hope today, in terms of being able to have the conversations with individuals to finalize appointments, and we'll be having announcements next week in terms of the people who will serve as co-delegates, an individual who will be serving in the special assistant for diversity, equity, and inclusion for the 2030 initiatives. But our progress is well underway. We have not been waiting for those appointments. There's so much underway around school and college planning, GER reform, curriculum development, a lot of the different activities to become more student-centric. That's our future. And I'm so glad to have so many people who help put that plan together and are helping drive it forward. So I wanted to make those comments. A couple of other final updates and comments about the fall. This is a wonderful place to be compared to where we've been for almost the last year and a half. It's truly remarkable that we can go into this type of planning, and where we planned last summer to come back in the fall, we're in a very different place. As the provost mentioned, we will continue to have the ability to pivot if we need to. We know now that we can do that, but let's look forward to the resumption of normalcy and getting our lives back on track in so many ways. So we're really excited about that. But again, we each have unique stressors. There's different elements in our life that it's not going to be easy. There's going to be ups and downs, and we may come back and find that we're going to have to do things differently than what we did before. And we will accommodate, we will adapt, and we're Panthers. We've got that resiliency. So that's the final thoughts. I do want to have two final comments, but I just want to see, it looks like there's a new question that came in, and it is from Jenna Jasna. Will UW-Milwaukee continue to have on-site COVID-19 testing? The current company states this is their last week. Robin, can you answer that, please, with specificity that you have?
Yes, we are continuing to have testing. The current company is ending, but we have a new company that will be taking over the following week. There should be a pretty seamless transition. We will be moving the facility upstairs to right near the vaccination site, but we are continuing testing throughout the summer. We're still waiting for word from UW system about the fall, but until we do, we are planning on it continuing into the fall.
Thank you, Robin. There was a comment that came in from Lori Glass. And she says, the vaccination clinic in the Wisconsin room has tons of 3 different stickers. I'm sure they would give them to whoever wants them. Agreed. Yes. Okay, so that's there. Thank you, Lori. Back to my final 2 comments that I'll make. Some of you have seen the newspaper article that came out, I believe it was yesterday, about the Freighter Trust potential gift of $5.75 million to UW-Milwaukee and $5.75 million to MATC. This has been in the works for several months. We're delighted that this is progressing, but it is not final yet. We're tremendously excited, and if you didn't hear this news, the premise of it would be for the dollars to be spent over a 20-year period to be devoted directly to students in healthcare majors in preference with students from Milwaukee. So we think this is just entirely consistent with the UWM's mission as well as MATC's mission, and we have a lot of planning and discussion in terms of how do we maximize the impact of this for our students? How do we maximize this in terms of collaboration and support for healthcare and employment opportunities? And how do we really create more opportunities for our health areas to work together in terms of the types of majors, the types of students that we can attract and create amazing careers for. So this is a great shot in the arm, and we'll keep our fingers crossed and do everything we can to continue to see it forward. At the same time, I can't announce who it's from, but we are looking at a sizable seven-figure gift as well that would be in support of scholarships for other areas on campus. And this is a great way to end the year. And I can tell you that while we are not in a specific campaign right now, this is going to be a very, very strong fundraising year. So this is exactly what is needed in light of the pandemic. And I'm so grateful for so much support that you've provided, just as I think about the support that you've provided and so many of our donors and friends in the community have for a number of emergency funds, whether it's the pantry or technology or scholarship or rent or other types of support. We've raised over $1 million just in terms of short-term emergency grant and aid for our students. So that's just phenomenal, and that's just immediately something that we've been able to distribute. In addition to scholarships that you should know on an annual basis between institutional and donor scholars, we're between $14 and $15 million a year that we provide in terms of student support. But I'd also acknowledge it is not enough. Over 55, maybe as much as 60% of our students' financial needs are still unmet. So that's a huge hole, and that's a major challenge. And as an Access University, that's something that we have significant commitment toward helping resolve. So we have a lot of things underway. So that's it. And the only other comment that I'd like to make is back to Johannes in terms of your comment about my health. Thank you, as always, for your encouragement, for your friendship and support. And I want to thank not only our incredible leadership team on this campus, but all of you who have continued to express support. You should know I feel great. I have been jumping back on the bike. I'm in the pool, and really look forward to setting some new records, climbing and biking some new mountains this summer, and really appreciate your friendship, engagement, support, and care. So thank you. And I think that with that, we're going to wrap it up. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you, and we'll continue to communicate. Here we go.